In the bustling heart of New York City, Tasha, a 17-year-old black student, boarded the crowded bus after a long day at school. Her shoulders sagged with fatigue as she navigated through the sea of commuters. As the bus lurched forward, her eyes fell on Henry, a 78-year-old white man struggling to keep his balance amidst the jostling crowd. Tasha's initial impulse was to look away, pretending not to notice. She was tired, her feet ached, and the last thing she wanted was to give up her hard-won seat. But something in Henry's weathered face, the way his wrinkled hands gripped the overhead bar with white-knuckled determination, made her pause. With a deep breath, Tasha stood up. "Sir," she called out, her voice barely audible above the din of the bus. "Would you like to sit down?" Henry turned, surprise etching lines across his forehead. He hesitated, then nodded gratefully, easing himself into the vacated seat. As Henry settled in, a warm smile spread across his face, transforming his features. "Thank you, young lady," he said, his voice gravelly but kind. "That's very considerate of you." Tasha managed a small smile in return, swaying slightly as she held onto the nearby pole. The bus continued its journey through the city streets, the constant motion making it difficult for Tasha to maintain her balance. Suddenly, the bus driver slammed on the brakes, sending passengers lurching forward. Tasha stumbled, nearly losing her footing. As she regained her balance, she noticed Henry reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a small, crisp business card and held it out to her. "Here," he said, his eyes twinkling. "I run a scholarship foundation. You might find it interesting." Tasha took the card, curiosity piqued despite her exhaustion. As she read the name Henry Blackwell Foundation, embossed in elegant script, Henry added, "It's the least I can do to repay your kindness." Later that evening, Tasha sat at her desk, the business card in hand. Curiosity got the better of her, and she began researching Henry Blackwell and his foundation. What she discovered surprised her. Henry wasn't just any retired old man. He was a former professor with a distinguished career in education policy. His foundation had been awarding scholarships to underprivileged students for over 2 decades, quietly making a significant impact in the community. Tasha's fingers hovered over her phone. Should she reach out? The idea of contacting a stranger, especially an older white man, made her hesitate. What would her friends think? But the memory of Henry's kind smile and the potential opportunity nagged at her. After a moment of internal debate, she made up her mind. Tasha dialed the number on the card, her heart racing as it rang. To her surprise, Henry himself answered. His warm voice put her at ease as they arranged to meet at a local coffee shop the following afternoon. The next day, Tasha arrived at the cafe, spotting Henry at a corner table. As she approached, he stood to greet her, his movements slow but deliberate. They ordered drinks and settled into an unexpectedly comfortable conversation. As they talked, Henry shared stories from his youth. To Tasha's surprise, he spoke candidly about his own experiences with prejudice. "I grew up in a different time," he said, his eyes distant with memory. "I saw firsthand how destructive bigotry could be. It's why I've dedicated my life to education and equality." Tasha listened, fascinated by the depth of Henry's experiences and the parallels to her own life. Despite their age difference, she found herself opening up about her struggles at school and her dreams for the future. As their meeting drew to a close, Tasha realized that her initial hesitation had been unfounded. She discovered a potential mentor in the most unexpected place, all because of a simple act of kindness on a crowded bus. Over the next few weeks, Tasha and Henry continued to meet regularly. During one of their conversations, Tasha opened up about her struggles at school. "It's not just the coursework," she admitted, stirring her coffee absently. "My friends don't get why I'm spending time with you. They think it's weird." Henry listened attentively, his brow furrowed in concern. "And what do you think?" he asked gently. Tasha sighed. "I think they're being narrow-minded, but it's hard. You know, I feel caught between worlds sometimes." Henry nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's a tough position to be in," he acknowledged. "But let me tell you something, Tasha. In my experience, the most rewarding relationships often come from unexpected places." He leaned forward, his voice taking on a passionate tone. Don't let others dictate your choices. You have dreams, ambitions. I've seen your potential. Don't let anyone hold you back. Not your friends, not society's expectations, and certainly not your own doubts. Tasha felt a surge of emotion at Henry's words. It was rare for someone to believe in her so fiercely. But how? She asked, vulnerability creeping into her voice. How do I ignore what everyone else thinks? Henry smiled, a mix of wisdom and challenge in his expression. You don't ignore it. You acknowledge it, then you choose to rise above it. Every great change in history started with someone willing to challenge the status quo. His words struck a chord in Tasha. She sat up straighter, a new resolve forming. You're right, she said, her voice growing stronger. I can't let fear hold me back. As their meeting drew to a close, Henry mentioned the scholarship program his foundation offered. You should consider applying, he suggested. It could be a great opportunity for you. Tasha nodded, a spark of excitement in her eyes. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly confident about her future. As she left the cafe, she knew she had a decision to make. And for once, she was ready to make it on her own terms. Inspired by Henry's encouragement, Tasha decided to apply for the scholarship. She spent weeks perfecting her application, pouring her heart into the essays and gathering impressive recommendations from her teachers. When she finally submitted it, a mix of anticipation and anxiety settled in her stomach. Weeks passed, and Tasha tried to focus on her studies, pushing the scholarship to the back of her mind. Then, on a crisp autumn morning, she received an email that made her heart race. With trembling fingers, she opened it, her eyes widening as she read the contents. She had been selected as one of the recipients. Overwhelmed with joy, Tasha immediately called Henry to share the news. His enthusiastic response warmed her heart, and they agreed to meet to celebrate. As their friendship deepened, Tasha noticed a change in Henry. He seemed more energized, often talking about new ideas and projects. One day, he revealed that he had started writing a book about his experiences and the unlikely friendship he had formed with Tasha. You've inspired me, he admitted, a hint of wonder in his voice. I realized I still have so much to contribute, so many stories to tell. Their unique friendship didn't go unnoticed. A local journalist, intrigued by the unlikely pair, approached them for an interview. Initially hesitant, Tasha and Henry agreed, hoping their story might inspire others to bridge generational and racial divides. The article, published in the local paper and shared widely online, painted a touching picture of their friendship. It highlighted how a simple act of kindness on a bus had blossomed into a meaningful relationship that challenged stereotypes and preconceptions. As the story gained traction on social media, Tasha found herself thrust into an unexpected spotlight. Comments poured in, many praising their friendship, while others questioned their motives. Tasha felt a mix of pride and unease at the attention. She was glad their story was inspiring others, but the scrutiny made her uncomfortable. Henry, noticing her discomfort, reminded her of the importance of their friendship. Remember, he said gently, what matters most is the genuine connection we've formed, not what others think of it. The growing attention on Tasha and Henry's friendship brought unexpected challenges. One afternoon, as Tasha sat with her usual group of friends in the school cafeteria, the conversation took an uncomfortable turn. I saw that article about you and that old white guy, one of her friends said, a hint of accusation in her voice. What's the deal with that? Are you selling out or something? Tasha felt a surge of anger and hurt. Selling out? What are you talking about? Another friend chimed in. Come on, Tasha. A scholarship from his foundation? Hanging out with him all the time? It looks like you're just using him for connections. The accusation stung. Tasha stood up, her voice shaking with emotion. You don't know anything about it. Henry is my friend. He's taught me so much, and he actually believes in me. Why is that so hard for you to understand? Her friends looked taken aback by her outburst. Tasha continued, her words pouring out, our friendship is based on mutual respect. We've both learned from each other. Just because he's older and white doesn't mean we can't connect. That's exactly the kind of prejudice we're trying to fight against. As she stormed away, leaving her friends in stunned silence, Tasha felt a mix of relief and sadness. She hadn't realized how much their opinions had been weighing on her. Later that day, she met with Henry at their usual cafe. Noticing her distress, he gently asked what was wrong. As Tasha recounted the confrontation with her friends, Henry listened attentively, his expression somber. When she finished, Henry surprised her by revealing his own struggles. "I understand more than you might think," he said softly. "Some of my old colleagues have questioned my motives too. They don't understand why I'm spending so much time with a young black student." His admission made Tasha realize that their friendship had challenges on both sides. "How do you deal with it?" she asked. Henry smiled wryly. "By remembering that true connections transcend age, race, and societal expectations. Our friendship matters, Tasha. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." His words strengthened their bond, creating a deeper understanding between them. As they left the cafe, both felt a renewed commitment to their friendship, despite the obstacles they faced. As their friendship deepened, Tasha began to learn more about Henry's past. During one of their conversations, Henry revealed a part of his history that he had never fully confronted. "I've always fought for equality," Henry began, his voice tinged with regret. "But there was a time in my youth when I didn't speak up against injustice. I witnessed discrimination and remained silent. That silence has haunted me ever since." Tasha listened intently, seeing the pain in Henry's eyes. This revelation added a new layer to her understanding of him. It wasn't just about his accomplishments. Henry was also driven by a desire to make amends for past inaction. Inspired by their discussions and Henry's honesty, Tasha proposed an idea. "What if we work together on a project? Something that promotes inclusion and equality in schools?" Henry's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "That's brilliant, Tasha. We could combine your fresh perspective with my experience in education policy." They began brainstorming, their excitement growing with each idea. They envisioned workshops, guest speakers, and interactive activities that would encourage students and educators to confront their biases and promote understanding. As word of their project spread, interest grew. Local educators reached out, eager to participate. Even some of Tasha's skeptical friends began to show curiosity about the initiative. Planning the event became all-consuming. Tasha and Henry spent hours researching, making calls, and refining their ideas. They faced challenges to budget constraints, scheduling conflicts, and occasional pushback from conservative school board members, but their determination never wavered. One evening, as they reviewed their progress, Henry turned to Tasha with a smile. "You know, when I gave you that business card on the bus, I never imagined it would lead to this. You've reinvigorated my sense of purpose, Tasha." Tasha felt a warmth spread through her chest. "And you've shown me that one person really can make a difference, no matter their age or background." As they continued working, both Tasha and Henry felt a growing sense of accomplishment. Their project was more than just an event. It was becoming a movement, a testament to the power of bridging divides and challenging preconceptions. As the date of their community event approached, Tasha and Henry's project gained significant traction. Local media outlets picked up the story, praising their efforts to promote inclusion and equality in schools. However, with increased visibility came unexpected challenges. One morning, Tasha woke up to find her social media flooded with notifications. Among the supportive messages were anonymous threats and hateful comments. Some accused her of betraying her community, while others targeted her with racial slurs. Shaken, Tasha immediately called Henry. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "We're trying to do something good. Why are people so angry?" Henry sighed heavily. "Change often brings resistance, Tasha. Some people feel threatened by what we're doing, but we can't let fear stop us." Despite Henry's reassurance, Tasha felt a knot of anxiety in her stomach. The threats, though likely empty, were unsettling. Henry suggested involving the school administration and local authorities to ensure their safety, but Tasha was hesitant. "I don't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing they got to me," she insisted. As they continued planning, the tension grew. During a meeting at the community center, Henry noticed Tasha constantly checking her phone, her face tight with worry. "Maybe we should postpone," Henry suggested gently. "Your safety is more important than any event." Tasha shook her head firmly. "No, if we back down now, they win. We have to show that hate can't stop us." Just as they were about to wrap up the meeting, they received an unexpected visitor. Marcus Lee, a popular local social media influencer known for his advocacy work, walked in. "I heard about what you're doing," Marcus said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "And I've seen the backlash. I want to help." Tasha and Henry exchanged surprised glances. Marcus's involvement could significantly amplify their message and provide a layer of protection against the threats. As they discussed collaboration possibilities with Marcus, Tasha felt a renewed sense of hope. The road ahead might be challenging, but they weren't alone in their fight for change. The day of the event arrived, bringing with it a mix of anticipation and nervousness. Tasha and Henry stood at the entrance of the community center, watching as people from diverse backgrounds streamed in. The turnout was even better than they had hoped. The event kicked off with a powerful opening speech by Marcus Lee, setting the tone for the day. Workshops on unconscious bias, panel discussions on educational equality, and interactive sessions on empathy building filled the schedule. Tasha and Henry moved from room to room, facilitating discussions and encouraging participation. As the day progressed, the atmosphere in the center became electric. People who had entered as strangers were now engaged in deep, meaningful conversations. Educators shared experiences and brainstormed ways to make their classrooms more inclusive. Students from different schools found common ground and forged new friendships. During a break, Tasha overheard two teachers discussing how the event had opened their eyes to biases they hadn't realized they held. It was moments like these that made all their hard work worthwhile. The event culminated in a closing ceremony where Tasha and Henry were invited to speak. As they stood on the stage, looking out at the sea of faces, they felt a surge of pride and accomplishment. "Today," Henry began, his voice strong despite his age, "we've shown that change is possible when we come together with open hearts and minds." Tasha continued, "This is just the beginning. Let's carry this spirit of understanding and inclusion back to our schools and communities." The audience erupted in applause, many rising to their feet in a standing ovation. As Tasha and Henry left the stage, they were surrounded by people thanking them and sharing how the event had impacted them. However, amidst the celebration, Tasha couldn't help but notice that the tension on social media hadn't disappeared. While many praised the event, others continued to criticize and threaten. As they were packing up, a volunteer handed Tasha an envelope that had been left at the registration desk. Curious, she opened it and found an anonymous letter inside. As she read its contents, her face paled. The letter contained detailed information about Henry's past, accusations of complicity in discriminatory practices decades ago, things Henry had never mentioned. Tasha felt a wave of shock and confusion wash over her. Could this be true? And if so, how would it affect everything they had built together? The revelation in the anonymous letter left Tasha reeling. For days, she grappled with the information, unsure how to proceed. Finally, she decided she needed to confront Henry directly. They met at their usual cafe, but the atmosphere was tense. Tasha's hands shook slightly as she placed the letter on the table between them. "Henry, I need you to explain this," she said, her voice wavering between anger and disappointment. Henry's face fell as he read the letter. He closed his eyes for a moment, shoulders sagging with the weight of long-buried secrets. "Tasha," he began, his voice heavy with emotion, "I've spent decades trying to make up for the mistakes of my past. But you're right, I should have told you everything." Over the next hour, Henry revealed the painful truth. In his youth, he had been part of a school board that had resisted integration efforts. While he hadn't been overtly racist, his silence and inaction had contributed to prolonging discriminatory practices. "It was cowardice," Henry admitted, tears welling in his eyes. "I was afraid of losing my position, of going against the status quo. It's the greatest regret of my life." Tasha listened, her emotions a turbulent mix of hurt, anger, and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "I was ashamed," Henry replied. "And selfishly, I was afraid of losing your friendship. You've brought so much light into my life, Tasha. The thought of you looking at me the way I look at my younger self, it terrified me." As Henry's story unfolded, Tasha began to see the full picture. The guilt that had driven him to establish the foundation, his passion for their project, It all stemmed from his desire to make amends. "I understand if this changes things between us," Henry said quietly, "but please believe that everything we've done together, every word of encouragement, has been genuine." Tasha sat in silence, processing everything she'd heard. The Henry she knew was a champion for equality, a mentor, a friend. Could she reconcile that with his past mistakes? "I need time to think," she finally said, standing up. "This is a lot." As she left the cafe, Tasha felt the weight of an impossible decision. Could their friendship survive this revelation? And more importantly, should it? In the days following her confrontation with Henry, Tasha immersed herself in research. She dug into old newspaper archives, interviewed former colleagues of Henry, and even reached out to some of the students who had been affected by the discriminatory practices of that era. What she discovered was complex and troubling. Henry's past actions, or rather inactions, had indeed contributed to prolonging unfair policies. However, she also uncovered evidence of his gradual change of heart, his eventual vocal opposition to those same policies, and his tireless work since then to promote equality in education. One afternoon, while sifting through documents, Tasha made a startling discovery. There was a connection between Henry's foundation and her own family history. Years ago, her grandmother had applied for a teaching position but was rejected due to discriminatory practices that Henry's school board had upheld at the time. This revelation hit Tasha hard. The scholarship she had received, the mentorship she valued, were they merely Henry's way of assuaging his guilt? The thought made her feel used and conflicted. As the date of the foundation's annual gala approached, Tasha faced a moral dilemma. She had been invited to speak as a scholarship recipient. Should she use this platform to expose Henry's past? Or should she remain silent, allowing his good works to stand unchallenged? After nights of soul-searching, Tasha made her decision. On the night of the gala, she took the stage, her heart pounding. The audience, including Henry, watched expectantly. "Good evening," Tasha began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I stand before you today not just as a grateful recipient of the Blackwell Foundation Scholarship, but as someone who has learned a profound lesson about the complexity of human nature and the power of redemption." She paused, meeting Henry's eyes in the audience. "Recently, I discovered some truths about the Foundation's history and its founder that shook me to my core." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Henry sat motionless, his face a mask of apprehension. Tasha continued, "I learned that the man I had come to admire had once been complicit in the very injustices he now fights against. I also learned that my own family had been affected by these past actions." The room fell silent, tension palpable in the air. Tasha took a deep breath before delivering her final thoughts. "But what I've also learned is this: people can change. Redemption is possible. The Henry Blackwell I know has dedicated his life to righting the wrongs of the past, to creating opportunities for those who have been marginalized." She turned to face Henry directly. "Your past actions caused pain, and that can't be erased. But your subsequent lifetime of work has created hope and opportunity for countless students like me. Today, I challenge this foundation, and all of us, to acknowledge our past mistakes openly, to make amends sincerely, and to work tirelessly for a more just future." As Tasha concluded her speech, the audience sat in stunned silence. Then, slowly, applause began to build. Henry, tears streaming down his face, stood up, joining the ovation. The gala ended with an atmosphere of introspection and cautious hope. As Tasha left the stage, she knew that this was not an ending, but a new beginning for her, for Henry, and for the foundation. The path forward would be challenging, but it held the promise of genuine reconciliation and lasting change.